Hello, dear friend. Now you will listen to the answers to the questions that come to mind before going to bed. Please don't forget to subscribe to get the latest sleep facts right away. Lie back and enjoy listening. How do mushrooms grow? Mushrooms are a unique form of life, located somewhere between plants and animals, although they share the ability to live a stationary lifestyle with plants. The growth of fungi begins with microscopic spores, small, seed-like particles that can be transported by wind, water, or animals to new areas. Once on suitable soil or an organic substrate, the spore germinates, forming the thinnest filaments called hyphae. These hyphae branch out, penetrate into the substrate, and form a dense network called the mycelium. The mycelium is the main part of the fungus, hidden from view, its root-like structure through which the fungus receives nutrients. Fungi do not possess roots, leaves, or chlorophyll, so they do not photosynthesize. Mushroom nutrition is a process of decomposition of organic substances. Hyphae secrete enzymes that break down complex compounds such as cellulose and lignin, turning them into simple molecules that the fungus can digest. This process makes fungi important participants in ecosystems, acting as natural sanitation workers who clean the soil and forest debris. When the mycelium reaches a certain maturity and environmental conditions suitable for reproduction, fruit bodies appear on the surface of the substrate, the visible part of the fungus, which we usually call a mushroom. The fruit body is formed from a compacted mycelium and can take on a wide variety of shapes: caps with legs, tubular structures, or even root-like growths. Spores form inside the fruit body, which then spread into the environment, completing the life cycle. Factors affecting mushroom growth include humidity, temperature, nutrient availability, and light. Most fungi prefer a moderately humid environment with a constant temperature, although some species are able to survive in extreme conditions, such as glaciers or hot springs. Fungi do not need light for nutrition, but it can influence the growth direction of the fruit body and spore processes. Fungal growth often occurs at a rapid pace. For example, cap mushrooms can grow to full maturity in just a few days. Mycelium hyphae, spreading over the substrate, can increase the area of their network by several centimeters per day. Unlike plants, where growth depends on photosynthesis and seasonal changes, fungi can respond almost instantly to improved conditions: increased humidity, the presence of organic matter, or reduced competition from other microorganisms. Interestingly, mycelium can exist for dozens or even hundreds of years in a suitable environment, remaining invisible and non-forming fruit bodies. Some giant organisms, such as Armillaria ostoyi in the USA, cover hectares of forest and are among the oldest and largest living creatures on Earth. Thus, fungi grow through a complex interaction of spores, mycelium, and fruit bodies, adapting to the environment and performing important ecological functions. Their life cycle is an alternation of latent mycelial growth with the periodic appearance of visible fruit bodies, which makes them one of the most amazing and mysterious representatives of wildlife. Why is the center of the Earth hot? The center of the Earth is an area located at a depth of approximately 6,371 kilometers from the surface, where the temperature reaches colossal values, about 6,000 degrees Celsius, comparable to the surface temperature of the Sun. This heat is the result of several factors related to the formation of the planet, its internal structure, and physico-chemical processes. The first source of heat is the residual heat generated during the accretion of the Earth, about 4.5 billion years ago. At the moment of the planet's formation, when dust, gas, and meteorites clumped together into large objects, colliding at high speed, a huge amount of energy was released. These collisions heated the material to a liquid state, and much of this heat remains inside the Earth to this day. The second important source of heat is radioactive decay. Isotopes of elements such as uranium-238, thorium-232, and potassium-40 are found in the bowels of the Earth. When these isotopes decay, they release energy in the form of heat. This process has been going on continuously for millions of years, maintaining the high temperature of the inner core and mantle. It is radiative heat that is the key factor today, explaining why the Earth has not cooled down completely. The third factor that maintains the high temperature of the Earth's center is the frictional heat generated by the gravitational differentiation of the planet. In the early periods of the Earth's formation, heavy elements such as iron and nickel sank to the center, while lighter materials rose to the surface. This process, called differentiation, was accompanied by the release of mechanical energy, which was converted into heat. Even now, the inner layers continue to slowly shift, and friction partially maintains the high temperature. The structure of the Earth also affects heat retention. The planet consists of a crust, a mantle, an outer liquid core, and an inner solid core. The inner core, consisting mainly of iron and nickel, is solid due to the enormous pressure exceeding 3.6 million atmospheres. This pressure prevents metals from melting, despite the extreme temperatures. The outer core, on the other hand, is liquid, and its motion creates the Earth's geomagnetic field through a process known as geodynamo. Heat from the center of the Earth is gradually transferred to the surface, mainly through convection in the mantle and conduction in the crust. The convection currents of the mantle can be compared to the movement of a boiling liquid. Hot masses rise up, and cooled ones sink down. This process not only contributes to the distribution of heat inside the planet, but also leads to tectonic activity, the movement of lithospheric plates, volcanism, and earthquakes. Interestingly, the temperature of the Earth's center is maintained unevenly at such high levels. Areas of the mantle called thermal plumes can transport particularly hot masses to the crust, causing volcanic eruptions and the formation of hotspots. At the same time, the edges of continents and oceanic crusts are slowly losing heat to space through radiation and conduction. Despite this, the inner regions of the planet have remained almost invariably hot for billions of years. Thus, the high temperature of the Earth's center is the result of a combination of residual heat from the planet's formation, continuous radioactive decay, and mechanical energy released by the movement of the inner layers. This heat plays a key role in maintaining geological activity, plate tectonics, and magnetic field formation, making Earth a vibrant and dynamic planet capable of supporting life on the surface. In the future, as it gradually cools down, the rate of processes will slow down. But given the huge scale of the planet and the slow decay of radioactive elements, the center of the Earth will remain hot for billions more years. This heat is not just an internal phenomenon, but a fundamental factor determining the geological and biological development of our planet. Why do Red Indians take scalps? Scalping is the process of removing a piece of skin from the head of an enemy or prey, which is often associated with the indigenous peoples of North America, known as the Red Indians. The origins of this practice are complex and multi-layered, and to understand it, one must take into account cultural, social, and historical aspects. Firstly, scalping was not a widespread practice among all Indian tribes. Some peoples of North America did use this ritual, but others either never practiced it or used it in limited ritual forms. Scalping is most often associated with the tribes of the Great Plains, such as the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Comanche, where it had both military and spiritual significance. On the one hand, scalping served as a symbolic proof of victory over the enemy. In tribal culture, where military achievements were highly valued, the scalp served as a testament to the bravery and skill of a warrior. The scalp was often sent to the village or kept as a trophy, demonstrating to other members of the tribe the strength and valor of a man. In some cases, certain rewards were paid for the scalps or used in exchange for resources, which turned this practice into a kind of socio-economic ritual. On the other hand, scalping also had a spiritual dimension. In some cultures, it was believed that removing the scalp takes away the enemy's life force or allows his spirit to leave the earth. It was believed that the scalp had magical powers, and its storage provided protection for the tribe or good luck in future conflicts. Thus, the ritual combined a material and symbolic aspect, combining military necessity with religious beliefs. European influence and colonial conflicts also played an important role in the spread and popularization of scalping. When Europeans arrived in North America, they observed and sometimes encouraged this practice. In the 18th century, colonial governments even offered monetary rewards for the scalps of enemies of hostile tribes, turning the ancient ritual into an instrument of political and military pressure. Thus, what began as a cultural tradition has become part of a conflict economy. It is worth emphasizing that scalping was not an exclusively Native American practice. Similar rituals existed in other parts of the world, including Europe and Australia, where the capture of the head or its parts was also used as proof of victory or a means of intimidating enemies. The peculiarity of the North American form was that it retained a lively ritual character until relatively recently. Over time, especially in the 19th and 20th centuries, scalping almost disappeared as a practice among indigenous peoples. The reduction of traditional tribal structures The pressure of the colonial authorities and cultural assimilation made it of little use. Today, scalps can only be found in historical sources, ethnographic studies, and museum collections. However, the myth of the bloodthirsty Indians, which is often imposed through literature and cinema, greatly distorts historical reality, creating a stereotype that has little to do with true cultural practice. It is important to understand that scalping was part of a complex value system in which military prowess, religious beliefs, and social norms were intertwined. It reflected attitudes towards death, victory, and spiritual powers, as well as strategic needs in tribal conflicts. From the point of view of modern anthropology, this ritual should be considered not as an act of cruelty for the sake of cruelty, but as culturally determined behavior that has a certain logical structure in the context of tribal life. Thus, Red Indians scalped as a sign of victory, proof of military prowess, and a way to interact with the spiritual world. This practice combined symbolism, social status, and military strategy, reflecting a complex system of values and attitudes toward life and death. Over time, the ritual disappeared, leaving behind myths and historical evidence that still arouse the interest of researchers and the public. Who is the owner of the Statue of Liberty? The Statue of Liberty is one of the most recognizable symbols of the United States of America, a symbol of freedom, democracy, and international friendly cooperation. Its full name is Liberty Illuminating the World. Despite the fact that many perceive it as a fully American heritage, the issue of ownership of the statue has legal and historical nuances. The statue was a gift from France to the United States in 1886 to mark the centennial of American independence and symbolize the friendship between the two countries. The author of the idea was the French politician Édouard Laboulaye, and the sculptor was Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi. The metal frame that supports the statue's copper panels was designed by renowned engineer Gustave Eiffel. The process of creating and transporting the statue was a large-scale engineering project. The statue was disassembled into 350 separate parts, packed into 214 boxes, and shipped across the Atlantic Ocean. After arriving in New York, the statue was installed on Liberty Island, where it was officially unveiled on October 28, 1886. Since its installation, its support and operation has been under the control of various U.S. government agencies. Initially, the island and the statue were under the control of the Ministry of Commerce and Civil Defense. But at the beginning of the 20th century, management gradually passed to the National Park Service, which is responsible for the protection of monuments and historical sites. Today, the owner of the Statue of Liberty is formally the government of the United States of America, namely the federal agency, the National Park Service. This means that the statue is owned by the state and protected by law as a national historical monument. Any actions related to modification, restoration, or operation are subject to coordination with government agencies, as well as compliance with monument protection standards. Despite its state ownership, the statue is also an international symbol. Her image is used in culture, media, and art all over the world, which makes her intellectual value universal. However, the use of commercial images of the statue is regulated by U.S. laws, since any official logo or reproduction used for commercial purposes must take into account copyrights for the design of the territory or cultural heritage. The statue is not only a symbol of freedom, but also a monument to engineering and international cooperation. The French gift highlights the diplomatic relations between the countries and their historical ties. At the same time, the fact of ownership of the U.S. state reflects the importance of preserving cultural heritage for future generations. State ownership provides financing for restoration work, protection from natural and anthropogenic threats, as well as maintaining the infrastructure of Liberty Island for tourists. The statue's owner, the National Park Service, is also responsible for educational and cultural programs. Every year, thousands of school groups and tourists visit the statue, studying its history and symbols. The programs include guided tours of the internal structure, museum exhibitions, and lectures on the symbols of freedom and democracy. This makes owning a statue not only a legal concept, but also a public obligation to spread knowledge and preserve historical memory. Interestingly, owning a statue implies not only physical control, but also moral responsibility. Any interference with the architecture or design of the facility is carefully monitored to preserve the authenticity and original idea of Bartholdi. The statue has undergone several restorations, including extensive work before the centennial in 1986, when the internal frames were renewed, corroded elements were replaced, and the copper shell was made durable. What is an antique? Antiques are objects of material culture that have historical, artistic, or collectible value and were created in the past. It includes a wide range of objects: furniture, paintings, books, jewelry, weapons, dishes, musical instruments, and even household items. The main feature of antiques is age. It is generally assumed that an item must be over 100 years old to be considered a real antique, although different criteria may be used in different countries and fields. Historical value is a key aspect of antiques. Such subjects allow us to understand the life and culture of people of past eras, their aesthetic preferences, the level of technology, social norms, and way of thinking. For example, 18th century furniture reflects the Baroque or Rococo style, showing how interior solutions and decorative art of that time were formed. Paintings or sculptures tell about artistic trends, society's views on religion, politics, and nature. Even simple things like dishes or tools give an idea of the daily life and household habits of people who lived centuries ago. Antiques often have artistic value. The craftsmanship, the quality of the materials, the design, and the unique details make the objects attractive to collectors and art connoisseurs. For example, carved mahogany furniture or a hand-painted porcelain vase are not only functional, but also aesthetically significant. The higher the quality of the craftsman's work and the rarity of the product, the higher its value in the antiques market. The economic component of antiques is also important. Antique items can cost significantly more than their original value on the market. Prices are determined by the rarity, condition, age, fame of the craftsman, or the historical context. In some cases, antiques become an object of investment. Collectors buy them not only for pleasure, but also in order to preserve value or increase capital over time. Auctions and specialty antiques stores provide trading mechanisms where items are evaluated by experts and the price is formed according to the laws of supply and demand. Antiques require special care. Old materials such as wood, metal, fabric, or paper deteriorate over time. Wood can crumble, metal can corrode, and fabric can fade. Therefore, collectors use special methods of storage, restoration, and conservation to keep items as close to their original condition as possible. Improper care can reduce the value of an item, or even make it unsuitable for collection. Collecting antiques is also associated with certain knowledge and research. Collectors study the origin of objects, their authors, historical periods, manufacturing techniques and materials. This allows you to determine authenticity, age, and value. Falsifications and forgeries are a serious problem in the antiques market, so expert assessment and documentation play an important role. Antiques are not limited to material aspects. They have a cultural and educational function. Museums around the world exhibit antique items, telling about the traditions, history, and art of various nations. School and university programs use antiques to study the history of material culture, archaeology, and art history. Through objects from the past, people gain an opportunity to better understand their roots and connection with previous generations. Interestingly, antiques can also have a symbolic meaning. Some items become family heirlooms, passed down from generation to generation, preserving the memory of ancestors, events, and traditions. They serve as bridges in time, connecting the past and the present on an emotional and cultural level. What is etymology? Etymology is the science that studies the origin of words, the historical changes and semantic transformations over time. She examines not only where the word came from, but also how it has changed under the influence of culture, other languages, social processes, and historical events. Etymology helps to understand how language reflects people's thinking, habits, social structures, and worldview. The roots of the word etymology come from the Greek words etymon, meaning true meaning, and logos, which translates as word or teaching. Thus, etymology literally means the teaching of the true meaning of words. It originated in ancient times, when scientists sought to understand not only the form of words, but also their meaning, which connected the language with the world around it. Etymology examines words on several levels. The first level is morphological. Words consist of roots, prefixes, suffixes, and endings, and etymological analysis allows us to determine their origin. For example, the word phone consists of the Greek roots tele, far away, and background, sound, which literally means sound at a distance. Such an analysis helps to see how people created new words based on existing roots, and how the logic of language reflected the understanding of the world. The second level is historical. Words pass through centuries and epochs, undergoing changes under the influence of migrations, wars, cultural contacts, and technological progress. For example, the English word window came from the Old Norse vindauga, which literally meant eye to the wind. In Russian, the word camera originally meant room, borrowed through Latin and French. The historical approach allows us to trace the path of the word from ancient forms to modern meanings. The third level is semantic. The meaning of words can evolve, shift, or expand. An example is the word computer. Initially, it meant a person who performs calculations. Then, with the development of technology, it began to denote an electronic device. Etymology analyzes such changes and shows how language adapts to new realities and reflects cultural and technological transformations of society. Etymology is closely related to linguistics, history, cultural studies, and even psychology. Understanding the origin of words helps to study related languages, restore lost language forms, and trace the influence of one culture on another. For example, Latin roots are present in many European languages. Mater, mother, in Latin, became mother in English, mère in French, madre in Spanish. These connections show the historical migrations of peoples, cultural contacts, and the development of language as a living system. Etymology also helps to understand hidden cultural layers. Often, a word retains traces of ancient beliefs, technologies, or customs. For example, the word boot is associated with an ancient root meaning leather shoes, and reflects the material and technology of shoe manufacturing in the past. Such discoveries allow us to better understand the history of human life and thinking. In practice, etymology is used in a wide variety of fields: education, journalism, literature, advertising, art, and even programming. Linguists, philologists, and historians create etymological dictionaries, analyze texts, and restore lost meanings of words. Journalists and writers use etymological information for more precise and expressive language. And teachers help students better memorize words through their story. Interestingly, etymology sometimes encounters myths and misconceptions. Words may have popular explanations that sound convincing, but do not correspond to historical data. For example, in Russian, there is a popular but incorrect etymology of the word lady, allegedly associated with the bar as a barrier. The true origin is often more complex and requires careful analysis of written sources and comparative linguistic data. How do trees grow? Trees are one of the most impressive living organisms on Earth, capable of growing for tens and hundreds of years, forming forests and creating unique ecosystems. Tree growth is a complex biological process involving cell division, tissue expansion, and interaction with the environment. It depends on many factors: light, water, nutrients, temperature, and the plant's genetic program. The growth of a tree begins with a seed. The seed contains an embryo and nutrients that provide the first stages of development. When exposed to suitable soil and water, the seed germinates. The root rushes down, forming the primary roots, and the sprout rushes up, forming the stem and the first leaves. The root system plays a key role in the growth of the tree. It not only anchors the plant in the soil, but also absorbs water and minerals necessary for development. The main part of the tree's growth occurs in special tissues: the cambium. Cambium is a thin layer of meristematic cells located between wood and bark. It divides and forms new cells, which turn into either wood, xylem, or bark, phloem. It is thanks to cambium that the tree grows in thickness. This process is called secondary growth and allows trees to increase the diameter of the trunk, strengthen and maintain a massive crown. Height growth is provided by the apical meristem, located at the tips of the shoots. Here, the cells actively divide, lengthening the stem and branches. The apical meristem also regulates the direction of growth, aiming for light. This phenomenon is called phototropism. The tree grows towards the light source to maximize photosynthesis. Branches, leaves, and bark develop according to genetically programmed patterns, creating a shape optimal for absorbing solar energy. Photosynthesis plays an important role in the growth of trees. The leaves convert solar energy into chemical energy, producing glucose and other organic substances from carbon dioxide and water. These substances are distributed throughout the tree, providing nutrition for the cells and stimulating the division of the cambium. In addition, trees use photosynthesis to store energy in the form of starch in the roots and trunk, which allows them to survive adverse seasons, such as winter or drought. Trees grow slowly but continuously. The growth rate depends on the type of tree, the environmental conditions, and the age of the plant. Young trees tend to grow faster, while old ones grow slower, focusing on strengthening the trunk and maintaining leaf mass. Different species have different growth strategies. Some prefer rapid growth in height to compete for light. Others grow slowly, but create dense and stable wood. The roots of trees also continue to grow throughout their lives, increasing the absorption area of water and nutrients. Mycorrhiza, a symbiotic interaction with fungi, helps the roots to absorb minerals from the soil more efficiently. The roots can penetrate deeply or branch superficially, depending on the type of soil, the availability of water, and the characteristics of the species. Seasonal changes affect growth. In regions with cold winters, trees become dormant when cambium cell division stops and photosynthesis decreases. In spring, activity resumes, and intensive growth of new shoots and leaves begins. In the tropics, where temperatures are stable, growth can be almost continuous, but it depends on precipitation and sunlight. The growth of trees forms annual rings, which are visible in the trunk section. Each ring reflects 1 year of life and allows scientists to determine the age of a tree, as well as analyze climatic conditions in the past. The thickness of the ring depends on the conditions. Favorable years produce wide rings, while dry or cold ones produce narrow rings. Why do they hunt whales? Whale hunting is an ancient and controversial practice that has both historical and modern aspects. Humans have been hunting whales for thousands of years, initially for survival, and later for economic, cultural, and scientific reasons. To understand the motives and consequences of whaling, it is important to consider both the historical context and current practices. Historically, whale hunting originated from human resource needs. Ancient peoples living on the coasts of the northern seas, such as the Eskimos and the peoples of northern Japan, used whales as a source of food, oil, bones, and skins. Whale meat served as a nutritional value, oil as fuel for lamps, and bones and teeth as building and craft materials. For these societies, whaling was a necessity. It ensured survival in harsh climates where other food sources were limited. With the development of navigation and industry, whaling has gained economic importance. In the 18th and 19th centuries, European and American whalers hunted whales for whale oil, which was used for lighting, lubricating machinery, and making soap, while whale bone was used for parachutes, corsets, and umbrella frames. The whale industry became a profitable industry, creating jobs and providing export earnings. During this period, whaling fleets traveled thousands of nautical miles to capture whales in the Arctic and Antarctic. Modern whaling is divided into several categories. The first is traditional or aboriginal commercial whaling, which is preserved by indigenous peoples, such as the Eskimos in Greenland or the Ainu in Japan. For them, whales remain part of the culture and the basis of nutrition, and fishing is strictly regulated so as not to disrupt animal populations. The second is industrial whaling, the purpose of which is the commercial extraction of whale meat and processed products. It is causing international controversy, as many whale species are endangered. International laws and agreements, such as the International Whale Commission, IWC, regulate whale hunting by setting quotas and prohibiting fishing in certain regions. A moratorium on commercial hunting has been in effect since 1986, but individual countries, including Japan, Norway, and Iceland, continue to kill whales, citing scientific research or cultural traditions. For scientific purposes, whales are sometimes used to study biology, ecology, and the response of marine ecosystems to climate change, although this approach is controversial among environmentalists. Ethical issues play a big role in the discussion of whaling. Whales are highly developed animals with complex social behavior and the ability to communicate. Their hunting is criticized by environmental organizations and the society advocating for the protection of marine fauna. Opponents' arguments include the threat of species extinction, animal suffering, and ecosystem destruction. At the same time, proponents of traditional fishing emphasize the cultural significance and sustainable management of resources. The economic and environmental impacts of whale hunting are diverse. Industrial mining leads to population decline, disruption of the balance of marine ecosystems, and the threat of extinction of certain species. However, in regions where hunting is regulated and conducted using traditional methods, the impact on the ecosystem is minimal, and local communities are able to maintain their cultural practices. Today, whale hunting remains a symbol of the contradiction between human needs, culture, economics, and environmental ethics. It shows how historical practices can be preserved in the modern world, and how the international community is trying to find a balance between preserving nature and respecting traditions. Whaling is an example of how human interaction with nature requires consideration of long-term consequences, understanding of animal biology, and respect for cultural differences. What is the caste system? The caste system is a social structure in which society is divided into strictly defined groups or castes with fixed social roles, rights, and responsibilities. It is one of the most well-known forms of social stratification, especially in the context of Indian society, where this system has developed and consolidated over the millennia. The caste system shapes social behavior, regulates marriage unions, professional pursuits, and relationships between people. The roots of the caste system go back to ancient history. In India, its development is associated with the Vedic era, approximately 1500 to 500 BC. When society was organized according to religious and professional principles. According to the Vedic texts, people were divided into 4 main varnas: Brahmins, priests and scholars; Kshatriyas, warriors and rulers; Vaisyas, farmers, merchants and artisans; and Sudras, servants and manual laborers. In addition to these main varnas, there was also a group outside the system, the untouchables, or Dalits, who were denied many rights and privileges. The main feature of the caste system is heredity. A person is born into a certain caste, and this determines their social status, profession, and opportunities in life. It was almost impossible to move between castes, and violating social rules was punishable by restrictions or exclusion from society. Thus, the caste system creates a rigid social hierarchy, where social status is determined by birth rather than personal merit. The caste system regulates many aspects of daily life. Marriages are usually performed within the caste, which prevents the mixing of social roles and strengthens cultural identity. Professional activity is also often inherited. The son of an artisan becomes an artisan. The son of a landowner becomes a landowner. Such rules contribute to maintaining economic and social stability, but limit freedom of choice and personal ambitions. From a religious point of view, the caste system was justified by the concept of dharma, a moral duty and a way of life. Each varna had its own responsibilities, and their fulfillment was considered important for the preservation of cosmic and social order. Violating the dharma was considered a sin, or a cause of personal and social suffering. This religious legitimation has helped consolidate the system over the centuries and explained its stability in society. Over time, the caste system evolved, combined with economic, political, and cultural changes. In medieval India, social stratification increased due to the influence of feudal orders, and the British colonial administration consolidated it through population censuses and legislation. The colonial authorities used caste classification to control the population, which increased social division. In the modern world, the caste system is formally preserved, but its role has changed significantly. In India, for example, the constitution prohibits discrimination based on caste and imposes quotas for education and employment for historically oppressed groups. However, social prejudice and inequality persist at the level of everyday and cultural practices, especially in rural areas. In cities and among the younger generation, there is a tendency to weaken strict boundaries between castes. The caste system is found not only in India. Similar forms of social stratification existed in other cultures and historical periods. In medieval Europe, feudal estates. In Japan, a system of samurai and peasants. And in Africa, tribal and tribal structures with fixed social roles. However, the Indian form is unique in its heredity, religious legitimation, and stability over thousands of years. How are calories measured? A calorie is a unit of energy measurement that is used to estimate the amount of energy the body receives from food or expends during physical activity. Understanding calories is important not only in nutrition and dietetics, but also in physics, chemistry, and biology, as energy is a fundamental quantity that determines life processes. The term calorie was coined by the French chemist Sadi Carnot in the 19th century, and originally meant the amount of heat needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. In scientific practice, a distinction is made between a small calorie, cal, and a large calorie, kilocalorie, kcal. 1 kilocalorie is equal to 1,000 small calories and corresponds to the amount of energy needed to raise the temperature of 1 liter of water by 1 degree Celsius. In everyday life, when labeling food, the word calories usually means calories. Calories are measured in 2 main ways: direct and indirect. The direct method involves using a calorimeter, a device in which a food product is burned and the amount of heat generated is measured. A classic calorimeter consists of a sealed chamber surrounded by water. When the product is burned, heat is transferred to the water, and the amount of energy can be calculated by changing its temperature. This method allows you to obtain accurate data on the heat of combustion of the substances that make up food: carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. The indirect method of measuring calories is based on human physiology. By analyzing respiration, the amount of oxygen consumed and carbon dioxide released, it is possible to estimate how much energy the body expends at rest or during physical activity. This method is used in sports science and medicine when it is necessary to accurately calculate a person's energy balance. The data helps to create individual diets, control weight, and maintain health. Different substances give different amounts of energy. Proteins and carbohydrates provide about 4 calories per gram. Fats provide about 9 calories per gram, and alcohol provides about 7 calories per gram. These indicators are used to calculate the caloric content of food. For example, a piece of bread weighing 50 grams contains about 130 calories, since most of the energy comes from carbohydrates, while a tablespoon of butter weighing 15 grams will give about 135 calories due to the high energy density of fats. Understanding calories is important for weight management. If the body receives more energy than it expends, the excess is deposited as fat. When there is a calorie deficit, the body begins to use its accumulated energy reserves, which leads to a decrease in body weight. This principle underlies diets, sports nutrition, and weight control programs. However, it is important to keep in mind that the quality of calories also matters. Foods high in vitamins, minerals, and fiber have beneficial effects on health, even if the calorie content is the same. Calories are also measured in various units of physics. Joules, J. 1 kilocalorie corresponds to approximately 4,184 kilojoules. Scientific research and international standards use joules more often. And in everyday life, the habit of counting calories remains in the diet. This intersection of measurement units makes it possible to link the biological and physical concepts of energy. Historically, understanding caloric intake has helped people move from evaluating food by eye to scientific nutrition control. In the 19th century, researchers began to study the energy value of foods and the ratio of macronutrients. This made it possible to rationally make diets, fight hunger and diseases related to malnutrition, and later create nutrition standards for athletes and the general population. What happened to the ancient Aztecs? The Aztecs were one of the largest and most advanced civilizations of Mesoamerica, which existed from the 14th to the beginning of the 16th century on the territory of modern Mexico. Their culture was characterized by a highly organized state, religious rituals, economic development, and architectural achievements. However, the fate of the Aztecs turned out to be tragic. At the beginning of the 16th century, their state was destroyed as a result of a clash with European civilization, primarily with the Spanish conquerors. The center of the Aztec civilization was in the city of Tenochtitlan, which was built on islands in Lake Texcoco and connected to the mainland by bridges and dams. The city was amazing from the point of view of engineering. Canal and dam systems provided water supply, irrigation, and transportation, and squares and temples created impressive architectural harmony. The Aztecs created a complex state structure divided into provinces, each of which brought tribute to the central government. The emperor wielded great power, and the religious system and sacrifices reinforced his authority and control over society. The Aztec economy was based on agriculture, handicrafts, and trade. They grew corn, beans, pumpkins, chili, and amaranth, used irrigation methods and terraced farming. Crafts developed in the cities, the production of fabrics, ceramics, jewelry, and weapons. Trade was carried out through markets, the largest of which was the Tenochtitlan market, where traders from all over Mesoamerica met. The Aztecs exchanged food, fabrics, jewelry, and valuable items, including cocoa beans, which were used as money. The fate of the Aztecs changed with the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors led by Hernán Cortés in 1519. The Spaniards used a strategy of alliances with local tribes dissatisfied with Aztec rule and quickly consolidated their positions. Within 2 years, despite the numerical superiority of the Aztecs, the Spaniards managed to capture Tenochtitlan. Undoubtedly, technology played a key role. Firearms, horses, and metal armor provided a significant advantage over the Aztecs armed with bows and spears. However, the most important factor was the epidemic of diseases brought by Europeans. Common European viruses and bacteria, such as smallpox, spread rapidly among the non-immune Aztecs and killed tens of thousands of people. This weakened the state, decimated the population, and disorganized society. Together with the military expansion, this led to the rapid fall of the empire. After the conquest, the Spaniards destroyed Tenochtitlan and built Mexico City, the modern capital of Mexico, in its place. The cultural heritage of the Aztecs was partially preserved in written codes, architecture, and traditions, but most of the knowledge and technology was lost. Nahuatl, which was spoken by the Aztecs, continues to exist as dialects among modern Mexican peoples, and symbolism and mythology are preserved in folk legends. Today, the Aztecs are seen as a symbol of a rich and complex civilization that achieved significant success in government, culture, and science, but was destroyed under pressure from external factors. Their fate is an example of a tragic clash of cultures, when a highly developed society was destroyed by conquerors with a different technological and biological base. Thus, the ancient Aztecs created a powerful state with a rich culture, economy, and religious system. But at the beginning of the 16th century, their civilization was destroyed by the Spanish conquistadors and epidemics brought by the Europeans. The history of the Aztecs remains an important part of the world heritage, demonstrating how the greatness of human culture can be vulnerable to global change, technological innovation, and disease. How is copper mined? Copper is one of the most ancient metals that was used by mankind back in the era of the Copper Age. It is valued for its high conductivity, corrosion resistance, and ductility, which makes it an important material in construction, electrical engineering, industry, and the manufacture of household products. Copper mining is a complex process involving exploration, extraction of ore, its processing, and production of pure metal. The first stage of copper mining is exploration of deposits. Geologists use a variety of methods to determine the presence of copper in the Earth's crust. These include geophysical methods that include measuring magnetic, electrical, and gravitational anomalies, as well as geochemical analyses that examine soil, water, and vegetation for copper compounds. Modern technologies also include satellite mapping and computer modeling, which makes it possible to accurately identify promising mining sites. After the discovery of a deposit, the development of a quarry or mine begins. There are two main ways to extract copper: an open pit and an underground mine. An open pit is used when the ore body is close to the surface. Blasting is used here to destroy rocks and extract ore. Underground mines are used if the copper deposits are deep. In both cases, the task is to bring the ore to the surface for further processing. The extracted ore usually contains copper in the form of sulfides or oxides mixed with other minerals. Ore enrichment methods are used to extract the metal. The most common method is flotation, when crushed ore is mixed with water and special reagents. Copper in the form of sulfides adheres to air bubbles and floats to the surface, forming a concentrate, and the empty rock settles to the bottom. This concentrate contains significantly more copper than the original ore and is ready for further processing. The next stage is melting. The copper concentrate is heated in furnaces to a high temperature, usually above 1,200 degrees Celsius. During the smelting process, copper sulfides are oxidized to form liquid copper and slag, waste, consisting of waste rock and impurities. The resulting liquid copper contains about 98 to 99% of the metal, but higher purity is required for industrial use. Electrolytic refining is used to produce pure copper. Liquid copper is poured into the anodes of an electrolytic bath filled with a solution of copper sulfate and sulfuric acid. Pure copper is deposited on the cathode, and the impurities remain in solution or settle to the bottom of the bath. This process makes it possible to obtain copper with a purity of 99.99%, suitable for the production of wires, pipes, machine parts, and electronic devices. Modern copper mining also takes into account environmental and economic aspects. Mines use water purification systems to avoid polluting rivers and groundwater, and recycling waste is recycled or disposed of. Filters and gas purification technologies are used to reduce gas emissions. In addition, methods of recycling copper from old products are being developed, which reduces the burden on nature and saves resources. Historically, copper was mined and processed on a smaller scale. In ancient times, people used simple mines and smelting in clay furnaces, which allowed them to create weapons, jewelry, and tools. Today, the process has become high-tech, including computer modeling, automation, and sophisticated equipment. However, the principles remain similar. Mining, processing, smelting, and refining. Copper plays a key role in the modern world. It is used in electrical engineering for the production of cables and transformers, in construction for pipes and roofing materials, in industry for the manufacture of machine and equipment parts, as well as in the chemical industry. Efficient mining and processing of copper ensures its availability and quality, which are necessary to maintain technological progress. Does cannibalism exist these days? Cannibalism is the practice of representatives of one species eating their relatives. In human history, cannibalism has been found in a wide variety of cultures. But in the modern world, it is perceived as taboo and strictly prohibited by law in almost all countries. Nevertheless, cases of cannibalism continue to be recorded in rare and extraordinary circumstances, which makes this topic both shocking and interesting from the point of view of anthropology, psychology, and criminology. Historically, cannibalism has had various forms and functions. In some cultures, it was ritualized, for example, during religious or military ceremonies. People believed that eating an enemy or an ancestor could transfer their power, wisdom, or spirit. Among some tribes of South America and Oceania, cannibalism was used as a way of commemorating deceased relatives, the so-called corpse-eating ritual, when body parts of the deceased were included in food in a symbolic and sacred context. In other cases, cannibalism had a practical or survival role. In conditions of hunger and extreme need, people resorted to eating human meat in order to survive. In the modern world, ritual or cultural cannibalism has practically disappeared. The international community views it as an immoral and criminally punishable act. However, cases of cannibalism related to crimes, mental disorders, or extreme circumstances have been documented. For example, serial killers sometimes consumed the meat of their victims, motivated by fantasies, psychological satisfaction, or a desire for control. Such cases are extremely rare and cause wide resonance in the media and society. There is also cannibalism in extreme survival situations. Historical examples include shipwrecks, disasters, and snow-covered expeditions. One of the famous cases is the tragedy of the Antarctic Flight 1972 expedition in the Andes, when survivors of the plane crash resorted to using the bodies of the dead to save their lives. Such cases are considered to be forced and exceptional, and legally and ethically they differ from criminal cannibalism. From a scientific point of view, interest in cannibalism persists in anthropology, psychology, and biology. Scientists are investigating the causes of its occurrence, the conditions under which people resort to cannibalism, and the cultural aspects of this phenomenon. Biological cannibalism is observed not only in humans, but also in animals, including insects, reptiles, and mammals, where it can play a role of population control, survival, or reproduction. This phenomenon is rare in human society, but studying cases helps to understand psychology, social norms, and extreme reactions to stress and hunger. Modern media and pop culture also shape the perception of cannibalism, often exaggerating its prevalence. Movies, TV series, and books create an image of a man-eater that rarely matches real statistics. In fact, cannibalism in the 21st century remains an extremely rare exception, recorded in isolated criminal and extreme cases. Cannibalism is legally prohibited in almost all countries. Even if it occurs in extreme conditions, such cases are investigated, and participants may be held accountable for murder, illegal handling of bodies, and other crimes. The legislation also takes into account the moral and social context, distinguishing between violent, criminal, and forced forms of cannibalism. The ethical aspect of cannibalism is particularly complex. He is confronted with fundamental moral norms, religious beliefs, and human rights. Modern societies view any forced consumption of human meat as a profound violation of human dignity. This is due not only to the danger of diseases and infections, but also to social unacceptability, which has been fixed for thousands of years by cultural and legal norms. Is the Ice Age over? Ice ages are epochs in the history of the Earth when the climate was much colder than it is today, and huge masses of ice covered large areas of the continents. At the moment, humanity is living in an interglacial period, but this does not mean that the Ice Age has ended completely. To understand the current climate situation, it is necessary to consider the history of glaciers, their cycles, and processes affecting the climate. An ice age is not a single event, but a series of cold phases called glacial, alternating with warmer interglacial periods. The most famous ice ages occurred in the last 2.5 million years in the Cenozoic, during the Pleistocene epoch. During this period, ice sheets repeatedly covered North America, Europe, and Siberia. Interglacial periods lasted for tens of thousands of years, when the climate was warmer and glaciers retreated, opening the earth to plants, animals, and human activity. We are currently living in the Holocene, an interglacial period that began approximately 11,700 years ago after the last maximum glaciation, known as the Wisconsin glaciation in North America, or the Valdai glaciation in Europe and Russia. Glaciers of that time covered most of the northern hemisphere, including the territories of modern Canada, USA, Scandinavia, Russia, and Great Britain. Over time, they began to melt, forming huge lakes, rivers, and fertile soils, which created conditions for the settlement of people and the development of civilizations. Although we live in an interglacial period, this does not mean the complete disappearance of glaciers. There are still huge ice sheets on Earth, in Greenland and Antarctica, as well as numerous mountain glaciers around the world. These glaciers are remnants of previous ice ages and continue to affect climate, sea levels, and ecosystems. Their slow melting, or growth, reflects global climatic processes and natural temperature fluctuations. The cycles of glacial and interglacial periods largely depend on astronomical factors known as Milankovitch cycles. These include changes in the tilt of the Earth's axis, the eccentricity of the Earth's orbit, and precession, which affect the distribution of solar radiation on the planet. These cycles create climate fluctuations, leading to cooling and the formation of glaciers, or to warming and their retreat. Thus, the Ice Age is a dynamic process, and the current warm period is only part of a long climatic cycle. Against the background of natural cycles, anthropogenic factors also affect the Earth's climate. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere has increased, causing accelerated global warming. This affects the rate of glacier melting, sea level rise, and ecosystem change. Thus, the modern climate is shaped by both natural fluctuations in glacial cycles and human activity. Studying glaciers and glaciation remnants helps scientists understand climate dynamics. Ice cores, taken from Greenland and Antarctica, contain layers that record temperature, atmospheric composition, and precipitation over thousands of years. This makes it possible to reconstruct the climatic conditions of the past, predict future changes, and assess the human impact on the Earth's global system. Interestingly, periods of warming and cooling affected biological and human populations. During the interglacials, territories for plants and animals expanded, civilizations developed, and cold snap and glacial expansion created barriers to migration, changed flora and fauna, and provoked extinctions. Thus, ice ages shaped not only the climate, but also life on the planet as a whole. How much does the atmosphere weigh? The Earth's atmosphere is a gas envelope that surrounds the planet, supports life, regulates the climate, and protects it from cosmic radiation. It consists of a mixture of gases, including nitrogen, oxygen, argon, carbon dioxide, and trace elements, as well as water vapor. Despite the fact that the air seems light and weightless, the atmosphere has a huge mass and exerts pressure on the Earth's surface, playing a key role in the functioning of the planet. The weight of the atmosphere is defined as the total mass of all gases in the Earth's gravitational field. The average atmospheric pressure at sea level is about 1,013 gigapascals, hectopascals, or 1 atmosphere. This pressure is the result of the weight of a column of air with a height from the surface of the Earth to the upper limit of the atmosphere. To calculate the mass of the atmosphere, use the formula: mass equals pressure times surface area of the Earth by acceleration of gravity. The Earth's surface area is approximately 510 million square kilometers, and the acceleration of gravity is about 9.8 meters per second squared. Substituting these values and taking into account the standard pressure, an atmospheric mass of approximately 5.15 times 101 Aten kilograms is obtained, which is equivalent to 5.15 trillion tons. For clarity, we can imagine that this is about 1 by 1/200 of the Earth's mass, which is about 5.97 times 102 kilograms. Despite its apparent lightness, The atmosphere has enormous mass and energy, affecting the weather, oceans, and biosphere. The atmosphere is not homogeneous. Its density and composition change with altitude. The lower layers, the troposphere and stratosphere, contain most of the air mass. About 75 to 80% of the total mass of the atmosphere is concentrated in the troposphere. All weather phenomena occur here. Clouds, rains, and winds form. The upper layers, such as the mesosphere, thermosphere, and exosphere, have a much lower density, but perform important functions of protection from cosmic radiation and meteorites. The mass of the atmosphere is important for understanding many processes on Earth. It determines the pressure that supports liquid water on the surface, regulates the climate and temperature, and provides oxygen for respiration of living organisms. Atmospheric pressure affects the boiling point of water, the speed of sound propagation, and even the structure of buildings, especially tall buildings and bridges. In addition, the mass of the atmosphere plays a role in global climate change. Greenhouse gases contained in the air retain heat, regulating the average temperature of the planet. Changing concentrations of these gases can alter the energy trapped in the atmosphere and affect global processes, such as melting glaciers, sea level rise, and extreme weather events. The mass of the atmosphere remains almost constant, but the composition of the air is gradually changing under the influence of human activity, industry, and fuel combustion. Atmospheric mass is measured through pressure and temperature observations at different altitudes. Meteorological stations, balloons, and satellites collect data on air density and composition, allowing them to simulate climate processes, predict the weather, and study atmospheric phenomena. Scientific calculations show that changes in atmospheric mass are insignificant at the global level, but local pressure variations are created by winds, cyclonic and anticyclonic systems. Historically, understanding the mass of the atmosphere has made it possible to form modern ideas about weather, climate, and global cycles of water and energy. In the 17th and 18th centuries, scientists such as Torricelli demonstrated the existence of air pressure, and later, calculations and experiments led to an estimate of the mass of the atmosphere. This knowledge became the foundation for meteorology, aviation, and space research. Why is pine an evergreen plant? Pine, like other coniferous trees, belongs to the category of evergreens, meaning it retains its leaves, needles, all year round, unlike deciduous trees that shed their leaves in autumn. This feature is the result of millions of years of evolution and adaptation to various climatic conditions, especially harsh winters, poor soils, and dry seasons. Pine needles are very different from the usual broad leaves. It is narrow, needle-like, with a dense, waxy cuticle and resin channels. These structures reduce water evaporation, protect against freezing, and insect damage. The narrow shape of the needles reduces the surface area through which moisture loss occurs, which is especially important in cold or dry regions. The wax coating and resin prevent excessive evaporation, provide protection against fungal diseases and pests, and allow the conifers to withstand strong winds and snow loads. Pine's evergreenness is related to its physiology and photosynthetic processes. Needles live from 2 to 10 years or more, depending on the species. During this time, it is able to accumulate solar energy and continue photosynthesis even in the winter months, when the leaves of deciduous trees are falling off. Thanks to this, the pine tree can receive energy during periods when other plants are at rest, providing sustainable nutrition and growth. The pine's root system is also adapted to harsh conditions. In many species, the roots penetrate deep into the soil, where moisture is retained even in dry seasons. Some species form a symbiosis with mycorrhizal fungi, which increases the efficiency of absorption of minerals and water. These adaptations allow the pine to survive in poor soils, mountain slopes, and in northern latitudes where other plants cannot develop. Evergreen is also of ecological importance. Pine needles serve as shelter and food for a variety of animals, including birds, small mammals, and insects. The leaves slowly decompose, enriching the soil with organic matter, which creates unique ecosystems of coniferous forests. In addition, pine forests play an important role in stabilizing the climate, absorbing carbon dioxide, and regulating the water balance in the regions where they grow. Pine trees retain their needles due to a complex metabolic system. The needles have a thick cell wall that is resistant to frost, and the resin and essential oils prevent cell damage and the proliferation of pathogens. In autumn and winter, metabolism slows down but does not stop completely, which allows the conifer to remain green and maintain minimal photosynthesis. This mechanism provides pine with a competitive advantage over deciduous plants in harsh conditions. The pine's evergreen adaptations are also related to its reproduction. Cones containing seeds develop in conditions of needles, which protect them from cold and wind. In addition, the needles help to retain moisture around the cones and roots, creating optimal conditions for seed germination and the survival of young plants. In ecosystems with cold winters or dry summers, such adaptations ensure the stability of the species and the preservation of populations. Interestingly, the evergreenness of the pine does not mean a complete lack of renewal. Some of the needles gradually die off and are replaced by new ones, which allows the tree to maintain the health and efficiency of photosynthesis. This process occurs slowly and evenly, so the tree looks green from the outside all year round, and the internal renewal cycle continues constantly. Did Vikings visit America? The Vikings, Scandinavian navigators and warriors of the 8th to 11th centuries, are known for their long-range voyages, the exploration of sea routes, and the colonization of northern Europe, the Atlantic islands, and even parts of North America. Archaeological and written sources confirm that the Vikings did reach the shores of America long before Christopher Columbus, although their stay was short-lived and did not lead to long-term colonies. The most famous sources about Viking campaigns to the west are the sagas, Scandinavian chronicles that tell about travels from Greenland to Vinland. Sagas such as the Greenland Saga and the Saga of Eirik the Red describe the expeditions of Leif Erikson and his contemporaries. According to these texts, the Vikings explored the western islands and the southern coasts of Labrador and Newfoundland, finding rich forests, pastures, and rivers with fish. The term Vinland translates as land of wine or land of fertility, reflecting the presence of fertile land and wild vines found on the coasts. Archaeological finds confirm the existence of short-term Viking settlements in North America. The most famous site is L'Anse aux Meadows in northwestern Newfoundland, opened in the 1960s. The excavations revealed the remains of wooden buildings, hearths, tools, and objects typical of Scandinavian culture, dating back to about 1000 AD. These finds unequivocally confirm that the Vikings did reach the American continent, although the number of settlements was small, and the stay was limited to several years. The reasons for the limited development of North America by the Vikings are related to geographical and climatic conditions. The road from Greenland through the Atlantic Islands was difficult and dangerous, and the climatic conditions and the presence of strong currents made regular flights risky. In addition, the meeting with the local population was probably of a conflict nature, which also limited the possibilities for permanent colonization. Vinland remained sparsely populated and did not bring a long-term economic advantage that would justify the development costs. The historical context also explains why the Vikings did not leave a noticeable mark on popular culture until the era of modern research. Unlike the late European expeditions of the 16th century, the Vikings did not have large-scale fleets and states that supported the development of new territories. Their contacts with America were sporadic, and information about them was preserved mainly in oral and written sources, which have come down to our days in the form of sagas and chronicles. Scientific research in recent decades, including DNA analysis, the study of artifacts and climate data, confirms the likelihood that the Vikings not only landed on the shore, but also tried to grow plants, raise livestock, and use natural resources. These short-term settlements demonstrate the skills of navigation, construction, and adaptation to a new environment that were characteristic of Scandinavian culture. Thus, the Vikings actually visited America about 500 years before Columbus, leaving short-term settlements in the northeast of the continent. Their travels are confirmed by written sources such as sagas and chronicles, as well as archaeological finds, primarily L'Anse aux Meadows. These expeditions did not lead to long-term colonization and did not have a significant impact on the indigenous peoples, but demonstrate the amazing navigational and cultural capabilities of the Vikings, their ability to explore new territories and adapt to the harsh conditions of the North Atlantic. Viking voyages to America remain an important page in history, showing that the exploration of continents and the discovery of new lands was conducted long before the era of great geographical discoveries, and that human curiosity and seafaring skills existed even in the Middle Ages. What is a weed? A weed is a plant that grows where its presence is undesirable for humans, agriculture, or an ecosystem created by humans. It can appear in fields, vegetable gardens, lawns, gardens, along roads, and in other places where it interferes with the growth of cultivated plants or violates aesthetic order. The concept of weed is not strictly biological, but rather is defined from the point of view of human goals and interests. The same plant in the wild can be considered useful, and in the garden, it can be considered a weed. Weeds have a number of characteristics that make them competitive. Firstly, they grow and reproduce quickly. Many weeds have the ability to reproduce abundantly, which allows them to quickly take over new territories. Seeds can be spread by wind, water, animals, or even together with agricultural products. Secondly, weeds are often resistant to adverse conditions: drought, lack of nutrients, low light, and even some chemicals, including herbicides. The history of human interaction with weeds goes back thousands of years. With the beginning of agriculture, people began to systematically cultivate the land, plant cultivated plants, and remove unwanted plants. The weeds, in turn, adapted to the new conditions, sometimes becoming especially aggressive in fields and vegetable gardens. They compete with cultivated plants for light, water, and nutrients, which reduces yields and product quality. Some weeds have a positive effect on the ecosystem. They prevent soil erosion, protect it from wind and leaching, support biological diversity, and serve as food for insects and animals. For example, dandelion or nettle can be useful for pollinators and neighboring plants, and their roots enrich the soil with minerals. Thus, the assessment of a weed depends on the context. In agriculture, it interferes, but in nature, it performs an ecological function. Modern methods of weed control include both mechanical and chemical methods. Mechanical methods include weeding, plowing, mulching, and mowing. These actions prevent the growth of weeds and reduce their competition with cultivated plants. Chemical methods include the use of herbicides, substances that inhibit the growth of unwanted plants. However, chemical warfare can have side effects: contamination of soil and water, destruction of beneficial flora and fauna, as well as the emergence of resistant weed species. Biological methods of weed control are becoming more and more popular. These include the use of natural enemies of weeds, such as insects, fungi, or bacteria that only infect certain types of weeds. Crop rotation and proper planting planning are also used to ensure that cultivated plants compete with weeds and inhibit their growth. These methods are more environmentally friendly and help maintain the sustainability of agroecosystems. Some weeds are used by humans as food, medicines, and ornamental plants. For example, burdock, nettle, plantain, and sorrel have nutritional and medicinal value. Weeds can serve as a source of vitamins, minerals, and active substances for phytotherapy. In this sense, weeds are not always harmful, and their importance depends on where and how they grow. The ecological role of weeds is also important. They are the first to populate disturbed areas of land, restore soil fertility, maintain biological diversity, and create conditions for the emergence of new plants. Weeds often adapt faster than cultivated plants, which makes them indicators of ecosystem health. Observing them helps to understand what processes are taking place in the soil and how the environment is changing. Why is gravity in space not the same as on Earth? Gravity is the force of attraction acting between all objects with mass. On Earth, we feel it as a weight that holds us on the surface and ensures the movement of water, air, and objects. In space, however, the feeling of gravity is different, and many believe that it is not there at all. In fact, gravity exists everywhere, but conditions in space create an effect of weightlessness that is very different from the usual feeling on the surface of the Earth. On Earth, gravity is determined by the mass of the planet. Any body is attracted to its center with a force proportional to the mass of the object and inversely proportional to the square of the distance to the center of the Earth. It is this force that creates the weight of a person, objects, and holds the atmosphere and water on the planet. When climbing to a height, for example, in mountains or on an airplane, the force of gravity decreases, but the changes are insignificant compared to the total mass of the Earth. In space, the situation is different. Although the physical force of gravity of the Earth is still present, orbiting stations, satellites, and astronauts are located hundreds of kilometers from the surface, where gravity is about 10 to 15% less than on Earth. This means that the Earth is still pulling objects, but they are moving with the spacecraft at high speed, creating a state of free fall. It is free fall that creates a feeling of weightlessness when objects and people float inside the station. Freefall is a key factor in space weightlessness. A spacecraft in orbit is constantly moving in an arc around the Earth at such a speed that it falls around the planet rather than directly at it. It seems to a person inside that there is no gravitational force, although in fact it pulls both the spacecraft and the astronaut. This state is called microgravity, and it creates unique conditions for experiments in physics, biology, and medicine. Microgravity affects all aspects of human life in space. Bones lose their density, muscles atrophy, and body fluid is redistributed to the head, which causes facial swelling and vision changes. These effects are due to the lack of constant stress on the body, which is present on Earth. That is why astronauts need simulators and special exercises to maintain their health during long-term missions. Gravity in space also affects the movement of objects and liquids. Water droplets do not fall to the floor, but gather into spherical shapes due to surface tension. The flame burns differently because heat and gases do not rise naturally. Such conditions allow scientists to study physical phenomena without the influence of gravity, which is impossible on Earth. In addition to microgravity in orbit, there is an effect of attraction of other bodies: the moon, the sun, planets. These forces create a gravitational field that affects the orbits of satellites, comets, and spacecraft. Scientists use gravity calculations for navigation and trajectory correction, ensuring the safe stay of humans and equipment in space. it is important to understand that space is not gravity-free. In fact, gravity is present everywhere, but its manifestation depends on the relative motion of objects and the conditions of freefall. Astronauts on the International Space Station are under the constant pull of the Earth, but the speed of the station creates the effect of floating and weightlessness. Thus, gravity exists in space, but it feels different due to freefall and the orbital motion of objects. On Earth, we perceive it as a constant weight, whereas in space, a state of microgravity is created when objects and people hover. Understanding this phenomenon is important for space medicine, engineering, and physics, as microgravity alters the behavior of liquids, gases, and living organisms, opening up new opportunities for science and research beyond Earth. What happened to St. Mary's? The Santa Maria, or St. Mary, is one of 3 ships used by Christopher Columbus during his first expedition across the Atlantic Ocean in 1492. This ship played a key role in the discovery of the New World, becoming a symbol of the era of great geographical discoveries. The Santa Maria was the largest of the 3 ships of the expedition, second in size only to modern concepts of naval ships of that era, but was of great strategic importance for the success of the voyage. The Santa Maria was a caravel, a type of vessel common in the Iberian Peninsula at the end of the 15th century. Its length was about 23 to 24 meters, width 7 meters, and displacement about 100 tons. The caravel had a high wooden superstructure, masts with square and Latin-shaped sails, which made it possible to use both tailwind and crosswind. This design made the ship stable in the stormy conditions of the Atlantic and capable of long sea voyages. During the first expedition, the Santa Maria served as the flagship. Columbus himself, the commander of the entire expedition, was on board. The ship was manned by a team of sailors, officers, and scientists who provided navigation, coastal exploration, and information gathering about new lands. Along with Pinta and Nina, Santa Maria has become a symbol of courage, adventure, and the European desire to discover unknown worlds. The fate of the Santa Maria ended tragically. On the night of December 24th to 25th, 1492, the ship ran onto a reef off the coast of modern-day Haiti, near the village where Columbus established a temporary settlement called La Navidad. The reasons for the shipwreck are being discussed by historians. It was probably due to poor visibility at night, navigation errors, and the peculiarities of the reef coast. Attempts to tow the ship or remove part of the cargo were unsuccessful. After the accident, the Santa Maria was dismantled, and the wood was used to build the fort and fortifications of the new settlement. This step became strategically important. The ship's materials made it possible to create a temporary base that ensured the survival of the Columbus crew before returning to Europe. Thus, despite the loss of the ship, the expedition was not disrupted, and the mission continued using the remaining caravels. The historical significance of Santa Maria goes beyond its physical fate. The ship has become a symbol of the era of great discoveries, courage, and perseverance of researchers. The loss of a ship on a reef illustrates the dangers of sea travel at that time. Navigation devices were primitive, maps were inaccurate, and traveling across the ocean carried enormous risks. Nevertheless, it was thanks to this ship that Columbus was able to discover new lands, establish the first contacts with the indigenous peoples of America, and lay the foundations for European colonization. Archaeologists and historians are studying the exact location of the Santa Maria, although there is still no definitive evidence of the remains of the ship underwater. Some finds suggest the presence of reefs and sunken fragments off the coast of Haiti, but the identification of wood and artifacts remains challenging due to time and natural conditions. Despite this, the Santa Maria occupies an important place in the maritime history and symbolism of the discovery of the New World. Thus, the Santa Maria ended its existence as a result of a shipwreck on a reef off the coast of Haiti in 1492. The ship did not return to Europe, but its timber was used to build fortifications, and Columbus's mission continued. The history of the Santa Maria reflects the dangers of maritime exploration during the era of great geographical discoveries, as well as the ship's importance as a symbol of courage, innovation, and the first contacts between Europe and America. Despite the physical loss, the Santa Maria remained in history as a key element of Columbus's first expedition, which opened a new world to mankind.